Hi, I'm Jason Martirino.
Hi, I'm Jason Rajagosingham.
We're a couple of elementary school educators with the Toronto District School Board, and we are here because we are concerned with some of the cuts that are going to be imposed by the current Conservative government.
So we're going to be talking to MPP Peter Tabuns, who's a former education critic and an ally of educators and parents and teachers.
So thank you for meeting with us, Peter.
Pleasure.
I first want to talk about class sizes.
Yep.
Now, the current Conservative government has looked at decreasing funding to school boards so that class sizes will have to rise. So that we're looking at class size averages rising in grades 4 to 8, which are already the highest.
Yep.
And then we're looking at class size averages rising, as well as getting rid of class size caps throughout the high school grades.
Yep.
What effect do you think this is really going to have on our education system?
There are going to be a lot of different effects. I would say for students and for their parents, they'll notice that students just don't get as much attention as they would normally get. And that's a real issue. There are some students in any school who are going to be able to perform well, whether they get a lot of attention or not.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big chunk of students who need that individual one-on-one attention, and their chances of success are going to be compromised by this. I don't think there's any getting around it. The other reality is, if you don't have a cap on the size of a class, is the cap physically how many students you can stuff into a room? I've already heard stories in some classes where students are leaning up against the windowsills. That's their seat.
Wow.
That makes no sense to me. City Adult Learning Center, which is not part of this, has already had a situation for years where students sit on the windowsills because they're just packed in. They aren't adequately funded. So you can see where all this goes if you don't have caps and you don't have funding.
Yeah.
And as you're probably well aware, we have quite a few students who need individual psychological or emotional support. In a larger classroom, a teacher who's going to spend a lot of their time trying to address the issues that those students have to have addressed, they're going to have much less time for the rest of the students.
I guess a question that's connected to that is in relation to the violence in schools that we
Yes.
see. It's an increasing problem, and a lot of people know this. But there are still some students that lash out violently, or situations where teachers are dealing with constantly with verbal abuse from students and that sort of thing in class. At the end of the day, no matter how much you tell yourself you need to help students through this, it does weigh on the teacher's ability to ultimately help all students in class, as well as those students that need that specific help. What do you think our government can do to help teachers combat this issue?
Well, there are two things that occur to me off the top. One is, you don't increase class sizes. You may look at reducing class sizes. Because when you have students who have emotional or psychological difficulties in a situation, when you increase the pressure on them and reduce their connection to the adult in the room, that increases the chance that they're going to act out. There's just no getting around it. So you want to depressurize, not increase the pressure in those situations. And I guess that's the simplest and easiest thing. But it's the simplest and easiest step that a government can take. Look at class size, look at the correlation between violence and acting out and the size of class, and allocate staffing appropriately. But the other thing, I think, is that you need support for teachers in class to give those students who need that extra emotional support the time and attention that's required. If we think it's important that students are given an environment where emotionally they're comfortable, stable, and not acting out, we also think it's important that teachers and other education workers aren't demoralized by a situation that they find upsetting or threatening. All of these things, I think, come together when you're talking about that classroom experience, primarily for the students, but also for the people who provide students with education and support, because if they don't have what they need, they aren't going to be able to give the students what they need.
Absolutely. And it's really nice to hear somebody recognize that the circumspection and all of the contributing aspects to having a healthy classroom and therefore a healthy education system.
Well, I'll say this. I was the education critic for the NDP for a few years, and so I had a chance in depth to get familiar with the issues. I mean, as a student myself way back when, and as a parent a while ago, I had some knowledge, but it was quite the process dealing with frontline teachers, dealing with their representatives, and getting a sense in quite a lot of detail of what went on in schools. And it's unfortunate that for a lot of people, they don't understand what's going on there because it's so essential that their children do get a high quality education. And I think if they understood it better, there would be even more upset and outrage about what the Conservatives are doing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Peter, I'd like to ask you some questions about the kindergarten program
Yes.
here in Ontario. So, as you know, the kindergarten program in Ontario is a very reputable, internationally known program that
Yes.
we have in Ontario. Now, the government is now playing on the idea of putting in 2 ECEs instead of putting in a teacher and an ECE. What effects do you think that will have on the quality of education in Ontario?
My sense of it is this, that having 2 people in a kindergarten classroom with different levels of training is to our advantage. ECEs I have tremendous respect for because I think they're well educated, but they have a different focus in their training. Teachers bring the potential for a higher level of learning being imparted to those students. That said, right now those classes are too big. And I talk to teachers who are trying to actually make those classes work. And for them, they find it exhausting. And they don't get to as much training and teaching as they would like. So I think ultimately to fully realize the potential of the talent in the room, you're going to need smaller kindergarten classes, right? They're just close to 30 kids in one room under the age of 5. Well, three kids under 5 is a lot of kids. When you're getting into the numbers we have now, you're just not getting the quality you need. So I think you need to do something about the size of the class as well as retain the professional skill set that we have with both levels of trained teachers and trained ECEs.